Hi, I'm Sarah Schatz, and you're listening to Kindle Curiosity, a podcast for curious souls where we explore the creative process. This podcast is powered by the Kindle community on Patreon to keep things advert-free. Take a seat by the fire, and let's welcome today's guest. Chad Fortenberry is a Renaissance man. He's a filmmaker, writer, creative, performer, and woodworker. I met Chad in our undergraduate theater studies at Mississippi University for Women, which has been accepting men since 1982, and it's been a long time, but I'm so excited to catch up.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for reaching out to me. Really appreciate it. It seemed like a lot of fun when you were telling me about this, and it's definitely right up my alley. You know, creativity. It goes hand in hand with what I do every day, and something I'm very passionate about. So yeah.
Perfect. So let's time travel back to when you were a little kid and talk about what kindled your curiosity back then.
Well, let's see. There were a lot of things that I was into when I was a kid, but art kind of always was one of them. My grandmother, she was a commercial artist, and she used to do paintings and stained glass windows, and my mother was also a painter and a piano player, and so art always and creativity always kind of weaved itself into my childhood. But one thing that I would say that really stuck out to me as a child was when we would love watching movies as a family, and then after the movie, me and my brother, we would always reenact the whole movie that we just saw. So we had to be very careful about what movies we saw, because if it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, everything got kicked and punched. So it was definitely something that I started doing as a young child. And then my dad always had a video camera too, and he always had that around, and we would always just try and film little short films and things like that with his video camera. And I know sometimes he didn't want us to touch it, being such an expensive thing back then, but we still did it and tried to make our own movies, our own home movies growing up.
Fun. Do you still have any of those?
Oh, yes, I do, but I don't know if they'll ever see the light of day. There's one that my dad, we were at Thanksgiving, and he decided to reenact one of the videos that I made, and it was a magic show, because I was also into magic when I was little, and I was really terrible at it, and it was really, really bad. But my dad decided to reenact this Thanksgiving my magic show that I filmed, and it was so awful, but it's always good for a laugh. It's one of those things that I'll probably try and keep buried. If you ask him, he'd probably give it to you, but
have to go dig that up.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so I can kind of see the connection. So you want to talk about how that led to your journey with creativity and what kind of things you do now?
Yeah. So it was always a part of my life, creativity and imagination too. I remember a lot of times. I mean, growing up in the 80s, we didn't have these cool Spy Kids goggles and things like that. It was something that I made. I really remember making a radio out of a tape measure. It's like I turned it into my walkie-talkie, and I turned toilet paper rolls into my binoculars and things like that. So it was something that we had to create a lot of these things for, imagination and play. And it was something that was always fun. I always enjoyed creating something. I've always enjoyed thinking about solving a problem and putting something together. And that kind of leads me into what I chose to do as a career, starting out as an actor. After college, that was always a part of me, but I also had this love for just creating art, and I think that's the biggest thing. Is no matter what medium I choose to do, I feel like the art is always there as long as I'm creating something, and as long as it's solving a creative problem. I think it's something that is at the core of what I do now. Because I don't focus mainly just on filmmaking. It's really anything that I can see fulfills me, from a beginning to end creation. and creating something that wasn't there before.
I love that. I can definitely resonate with that. I've tried throughout the years to pick one thing to stick to, and it always ends up feeling kind of stifling because I have so many interests.
Yeah, no, it's definitely along that lines because, I always come back to filmmaking because it encompasses so many things. It encompasses a lot of times music. It encompasses, the image as well. And so there's just so many parts. There's so many parts that go into it, whether it's directing, whether it's being a director of photography or editing even. You're using all of these different aspects of it that create one whole piece of art. And it's hard for me to focus on one thing because I even like, woodworking. That's something that is another love of mine. It's just a hobby for me, and I like building things. I like fixing things, and even taking apart things and seeing how they work and trying to figure out how things work. And I also have a love of technology too. So that's, when I'm thinking about renovating my house, it's, I'm thinking about, okay, can I put Cat 6 cable throughout all of my house and make sure that I have a good internet speed, and I'm going to set up a network area storage, and I have all these ideas on the technology side too. So it's something that it's hard for me to focus on one thing, but I feel like it always comes back to that inherent problem solving. And a lot of creativity for me is problem solving, and that's something I enjoy. So it's something that's always at the core, no matter what I'm creating.
Right, and I can definitely hear a lot of curiosity in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
You're curious about technology, and you're curious about woodworking, and
Yeah.
filmmaking is great, and all performance arts because they encompass so many of those things.
Definitely. And it's something that the curiosity side, I feel like whenever I'm talking to, whether it's somebody I work with or somebody that works for me, I always want them to have what I call an intelligent curiosity. And that's something that, I think as creators, I think as creatives, we're constantly learning. And I think that's something that we constantly have to be doing because things change so often. And especially in the filmmaking industry, bodies of cameras change so often. And same thing with photography, styles change so often that we have to constantly be learning. And you can always tell those people that have that curiosity to figure out something, or that curiosity to find a better way, or to find something different than what everybody else is doing. And it's that curiosity that I think drives a lot of people I work with and drives me as well.
So let's kind of dig into your filmmaking creative process.
So filmmaking creative process happens for me multiple different ways. Right now, I'm going through trying to come up with creative ideas for different videos, and getting to it in one way is never the way that it happens for me. Like I can't sit down and go, okay, I need a video. Let me come up with this creative idea and let's do it right now in the moment. It kind of happens organically for me. It's, okay, let's sit down. What are the parameters? Who's the audience I need to speak to? And what am I trying to say? Okay, once I have that down, then I sit with it for a little while. I go throughout my day. I let things throughout my day influence the idea that I have. I'm constantly researching, seeing what other trends are out there, what other things people are doing. And while I don't want to copy what other things they're doing, it really helps inform just an overall creative process. You can kind of, just get ideas, things that get a baseline, and then you can build upon that. And it's something that I try to do in my filmmaking is I want to see what everybody else is doing and then forget it. And then once I forget it, then I can go into my creative process where it's coming up with the actual idea, writing it down. Sometimes it comes through music for me. Sometimes I have to listen to a piece of music and then it starts to build the emotional story for me. Sometimes it starts with one word, and that one word leads into what the video is going to be. Sometimes it starts with a tagline, and that tagline I will then go back throughout the video to kind of figure out what that is. So everything always ends on, some kind of tagline, some kind of motto. And then I take that and I reverse that back. And it's like, how do we get to this point? So that's another way of problem solving that gets me to the creative idea that I'm looking for.
And so once you have an idea and a concept, how is your creative process as a director of photography?
As a director of photography, it's something that there's a lot of things that go into it, right? You're trying to shape your light to do what you want it to do. You're trying to frame your image to do what you want it to do. And it's a lot of times that's a discovery process. You can have the best plans laid out, but once you get on set and once you get into the environment that you're in, then plans can change. And I think a lot of times it's being flexible inside of that really enhances what you're doing, and just focusing on the image and the story that you're trying to tell whenever you're inside of that. I have something that I like to go by that's called a lot of people use it. It's an 80-20 rule. So, 80% versus 20%. So a lot of times when I'm looking at my image, does it support my story? When I'm changing something, does it support my story 80% or does it support my story 20%? And this is just an internal battle for me, is if it supports my story 80%, then I probably need to change it and I probably need to do it right. If it supports my story only 20%, then it's something that I might have to tell myself to let go. I might have to, because there's all different kinds of time constraints, right? Whenever we're trying to create in the moment. So using that personal rule a lot of times helps me figure out how do I support my story. And it just, it helps me on that side of things.
Yeah, where to invest your time that pays off for the storytelling.
Yeah, and even, it's so difficult with being a filmmaker because you're always constantly wanting to do something that really draws that emotion out to people. But I always tell people learn the basics first, and then you can break the rules. So it's come up with, say you're doing an interview or something like that. You have your basic 3-point lighting set up. While that's good and great, and a lot of interviews look great with 3-point lighting, once you learn that basic, that's cool. Now, once you take that basic and you're like, okay, I've learned this, I feel like I'm comfortable with it, now let me try something different. So it's adding to that or taking away just to support your story. And for me, it always comes back to the story. And when it comes to being a cinematographer or a director of photography, each of these cameras, each of these lights, all of these things that you have to capture your image, those are all tools. And just knowing how to use those tools to support your image is what it's about. It's not necessarily about the tool. I can always get caught up in the latest and greatest, 4K camera or, a red camera versus an RE camera. It's just, I can get really gear heavy inside of that. But whenever I'm telling people to start creating or to want to create, it's start with what you have, and it's using the tool to the best of its ability and experimenting. So learning the basics, using that tool to support your story. And that's where some of the best creative ideas can come out, is when that story is always there. So I always say focus on the story first.
Right, because you can always learn more about tech, but you can learn basic storytelling with just your cell phone.
Yeah, definitely. And, a lot of people, I can't remember if this is exactly right, so don't 100% quote me on this, but I think it was Steven Soderbergh that filmed something recently all on an iPhone, and how mobile technology on the filming side is becoming widely used, and the cameras in our pockets are huge. And when it comes to Instagram stories, or when it comes to Facebook, everybody has a creation tool in their pocket. And it's something that's very exciting right now, because you're getting exposure to so many other stories, to so many people coming up with ideas and creating things. So it's always a curiosity to see what's next and to see how people are going to use things.
For sure. So we talked about writing, talked about filming. So I guess next we'll move into editing.
Yeah, editing process. Now, this one, I always feel like I am not a good editor, but I do it every day. So I think it's something that I think everybody who's creative kind of struggles with. It's something where you don't feel like everything's finished. At some point, you just have to tell yourself that it's finished. At some point, you have to let it go. And a lot of times I will get down into the weeds about it. And then I bring back in my 80-20 rule where it's, does this support my story 80% or does it support it 20%? And that it saved me many times just with that internal struggle. And editing it comes about different ways for me too, just like the idea process. Sometimes I'll start with a music bed that informs my edit. A lot of times it could be, the beats in the music kind of help me cut to what I need to cut to. And it organically kind of feels like a part of it. So sometimes it starts with music. And a lot of times that's when I'm working with imagery-based edits. It's something that doesn't necessarily have a audio story, somebody talking about something. It's something that is more image-based and allowing that music to tell the story on the audio side that kind of helps support the imagery. But when it comes to interviews, I'll start with my interview. Whenever I'm cutting together, say, a documentary or something like that, I'll start with my interview and I'll cut that down once to a rough cut. And, I'll listen to it and I'll see what they're saying. And then I'll go from there. I'll write down notes about it. And once I write down notes about it, I'll take a look at it. And then I'll physically try and figure out, okay, what do I need and what do I need to let go of to tell a more concise story? And what are the things that I'm repeating? What are the things that, don't necessarily need to be there? So then I go through my second editing process where I cut down that interview a little bit more. And then I'll take that interview with it cut down and I'll put it into, put some B-roll over it or do some action type shots, just some imagery to lay over it. And then once I get a rough cut of the full piece, I'll go back and I'll edit it again. So I'll take it again and I'll go back through and I'm like, okay, this doesn't feel right. I need to move this here. I need to move that there. So it's a long process for me, but it's something that I feel like in order to do it right, I need to revisit it and revisit it and revisit it. And then sometimes take breaks. And I'll take breaks. I'll walk away and then I'll come back and then with a fresh pair of eyes go and a fresh pair of ears go, is it saying everything that it needs to say? Are the visuals supporting what it needs to be? And that's just on a documentary side. That's something that I go through all the time. And then just other regular experimental type editing, trying a new trend or trying something that supports a new style or just testing out, experimenting things. That's always a part of the process because I don't ever want my edits to feel stale. Right now we're battling, especially in the advertising world, we're battling with people's attention spans.
Yeah,
and that's the biggest thing right now. I just went to South by Southwest and went to many sessions on video and advertising. And people are saying right now that the average attention span for an ad on social media is 6 seconds.
Wow.
And it's like, how can you tell a story in 6 seconds? And it really comes down to distilling your message down to that one point that you're trying to make. And as a filmmaker, that's almost freeing in a way. Because I've had all of these years of creating, 5-minute pieces, 2-minute pieces, whether it's a 15-second spot, 30-second spot. But all of these things we've created, I put in all the information I want to do. And then we just take it away and make it simplistic.
Right.
It's like once you know how to do all of those things, it goes back to the basic idea, the basics, right? Once you know all of these basics, then you can get to the point that you're trying to make in a more simplistic way. So once you know how to create the holistic approach, then just start taking away. And that's kind of freeing in a way, but very challenging too.
Right.
Because, everybody has a different viewpoint. So it's like, what can we do that's universal for that audience that is going to make them either click on this ad or it's going to make them want to see more,
Right.
to connect with the company more. And honestly, I feel like, the traditional commercial is dying. It's something that, a lot of people are not doing anymore. And that's kind of interesting as well from a filmmaker standpoint is, a lot of things are going back to the story. A lot of things are not necessarily, people don't want to hear about your product as much as they want to connect with your product. They don't want to you to tell them how good your product is. It's an emotional reaction a lot of times. It's, what can your product do for me? And how do I see that fitting into my everyday life? What kind of emotional reaction am I going to have to not just that product, but also that company?
Right. And I'm sure that's much more interesting
Oh, yeah.
than the information buy type commercials.
Oh, yeah. It's much more interesting. And you get a lot of more freedom in that to actually tell stories, which I'm so thankful for. A lot of times things that I've been seeing lately are kind of where how it all started was we would have these companies that would sponsor these things. And that's pretty much what it's coming back to with social media. People, and even on Netflix, people are sponsoring these creative stories, which is very interesting place to be, where a company is really investing a lot in the art of it and then just putting their sponsor name on it. It's like, hey, here's this money, create something beautiful, create a good story. And I mean, our name on it is not as important as what the story you're telling. So it's really an interesting place to be where I think brands are really focusing on allowing stories to drive their products, which is kind of coming back full circle to original sponsorship of television shows or things like that. So
right. I remember I Love Lucy. It used to be like that. We never saw those commercials,
Yeah.
but that's how it was when they were first aired.
Yeah, and so it's really interesting how a lot of people don't realize it's going back to that.
Right.
But it's something that I completely see. I completely see what it's doing, and then we have other things that are real connection of stories. Right. It's so many advertisers have spent most of their advertising budget on influencers and influencer marketing. And that's anything from, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, whatever it is on the social media side, even Twitter. They go to these people who have an audience, who have stories that they're telling, and they connect with them directly to sell a product or introduce a product directly to that audience that is there, because they're actively engaged in that person's story. So any product that they push through them is going to be most likely an actionable customer that is going to want to use that product,
right,
because they're already connected with them.
Yeah, I know as a viewer, if I see a YouTuber I follow suggest a certain thing, I know I trust their taste. It's different than just seeing a commercial that the product is like, we're great.
Right.
Of course they think they're great.
Yeah.
But when someone that has similar taste to you suggests something, then you really take that on board.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because it's even that traditional sense of keeping up with the Joneses, right? It's that saying that has always been with us. That's like we see what somebody else has, the neighbor has, and you're like, ooh, no, they chose to buy that. I want that. So it's kind of that influencer marketing that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's very powerful. I have to be careful sometimes when I watch. I have to be careful what I'm watching, because if I watch too many like camera gear haul videos, I'm like, oh, I have to have all this new stuff.
Exactly.
Where you were talking about before, I need to use what I have, and at some point I can power it up. But if I keep just buying new things and not experimenting and learning how to use it and practicing, then there's no point in buying more.
Yeah. It's that internal struggle as well. That's always there for me. Is the support tools, or is it just doing it?
Right.
And I have a tough time. I'm preaching to the choir here, because I have a tough time telling myself, just try it. Just do it, because then I'm like, oh, but the research isn't there. It's that's not going to happen. Why would that work out? And then I get into my internal struggle of creativity where I'm like, oh, I'm not even going to try it because it's not going to work out. When I should just,
Right. It all ran through in your
yeah,
brain before you even.
yeah, before I even did it.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
And at some point, it's all right. You just got to do it.
Yeah, that's how it's been for the podcast for me.
Mhm.
I spent a long time in my brain thinking through it. And as soon as I started taking action and recording interviews, like the stress of it melted away because I was like, it's okay.
Yeah,
Or the first one I recorded, I was worried about it. And then I listened back and I was like, oh, it's okay.
yeah,
But you can get so stuck in your head where you're not actually doing
yeah,
anything. You're
yeah,
just running it through
yeah. Yeah,
simulations.
oh, definitely. And I get stuck there all the time. Get stuck in that thought loop to where I'm constantly battling myself. And I think that's a lot of things, as you said, a lot of creators have that problem. They have that issue of wanting to create something, but not being able to say it's done, or not being able to feel fulfilled with what it is, because might have a plan in mind, and then once you get to the actual creation portion, it could change. And dealing with that change and dealing with what it's becoming is kind of a curiosity and discovery, right? It's kind of seeing what something's becoming, but it also is allowing something to die, right? It's allowing something to be let go to form something else. And that's, I mean, not to get so philosophical, but I mean, it's honestly a circle of life, right? It's allowing something to grow and then die so that something else can grow. And no matter what I do, I think the process of the cycle, the process of the creativity is something that's always there for me. So whether I am filming medical stuff, or whether I'm filming a music artist doing a music video, or whatever it is, it doesn't matter about the content for me that's going out. It matters about that process for me. It's allowing something to be created. And allowing that cycle to continue.
And the more you create, you learn to trust that. Whereas sometimes when you're first starting something new, you can take that to mean you're just not good at the thing, when actually it happens to everyone.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of times you're so alone in it, right?
Right.
As a creator, your mind is your mind, and you get stuck, and you get alone in the creation of it. So it's easy to get stuck because you're not necessarily bouncing it off of other people. I know that's one of the reasons I love filmmaking so much, is that it's a creative collaboration. You have to have more people than just yourself to create this piece of art. And that's a part of it that is really exciting, because then you're pulling in other people's, viewpoints, other people's creativity, and creating something that originally you didn't think it was going to be that way, but it could be 20 times better than what you thought it was going to be. So that's something that is always fun during the filmmaking process.
Yeah. So I want to take kind of like a left turn, a sharp turn,
Yep.
and talk a little bit about Improv Everywhere. I know you're not involved with them right now, but that's a pretty interesting process, and they still exist on YouTube, so I'll be sure to link to some of that in the show notes.
Yeah, so Improv Everywhere, they cause scenes all over New York City. One of the things that they do every year is the No Pants subway ride that you've probably heard about. It's where they get a ton of people together and go ride the subway in no pants, and people ask them, well, what's going on? Why do you have no pants on? And he's like, everybody just says, oh, I just forgot my pants today. And it's just something that's so simple that is just absolutely hilarious. And if you check out their YouTube, it is constant. They've been around for a long time, constantly creating funny scenes throughout New York City. And I had the opportunity to pitch them an idea. Charlie, he sent out a email to everybody who was on their email list at the time when I was living in New York. And he was asking for different ideas, to throw different ideas out there. So I had just visited the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I turned a corner and I saw a painting that looked exactly like me. And I was like, this is crazy. And I was like, is anybody else seeing this? This is, I'm shocked right now. And it's still yet to be seen if King Philip IV of Spain is actually connected in my ancestry, but
pretty sure
there's a possibility there. So I had this idea, and I was like, you know what, this would be a lot of fun to do. So I emailed Charlie Todd and said, hey, what do you think about me going into the Metropolitan Museum of Art dressed up as King Philip IV of Spain and signing autographs or something like that? And he was like, well, yeah, this sounds like a great idea. So we decided to do it, and the day before we were going to do it, Charlie went out to the Metropolitan Museum of Art just to check and see, do a little bit of a scout and kind of figure out the process. And they had taken the painting down. They had taken it down for cleaning and for verification, because they wanted to make sure that it was a actual Velázquez painting rather than one of his assistants. Mm-hmm. And so they took it down, and it was down for maybe a year or two. It was down for a while. And so we kept an eye on it just to kind of see. And then I get this New York Times article, and has King Philip IV on the front page there. And it says the Velázquez painting had been confirmed and had been placed back on display. And just me reading this newspaper, seeing that picture, and I was like, oh, Charlie, we got to do this. So I emailed him. I was like, oh, it's back up. We got to do it now. And so we did it that week. And coincidentally, that was the actual day, the next day I moved out of New York.
Wow.
That was me. I went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art with Charlie. We filmed it. I was signing autographs. Then the next day I moved out of New York City to Nashville, Tennessee. And it was kind of a good send off for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It was perfect timing.
Yeah, perfect timing. And we just had this write up in the New York Times for the actual painting itself. So it was kind of bringing more attention to that painting. So on an art side, it was very interesting as well. But we did get kicked out in like 10 minutes. It was, we made sure not to break any rules.
Right.
So I was signing in pencil because you weren't allowed
to have a pen, right?
Yeah, so we made sure not to break any rules, but we still got asked to leave. So we just made sure that we were like, we'll go ahead and go. We've had our fun. So no harm, no foul. But that experience, I guess a lot of it kind of really just bit the bug for me for continuing creation, is coming up with that idea and then seeing that come to life and seeing that affect so many people in a positive way, and having fun around that, and telling a silly story. I think if you look at the video, in one part, Charlie tells one of the people there that I'm 400 years old, and he just goes with it.
Remarkably well preserved.
Yeah, remarkably. He asks him, what does he eat? Nice. So yeah, that was a fun thing to get to be a part of, and it's always there is a great creation of art, because it's that performance art. It's in an art gallery of all things. It's using something that's old to create something that's new. So it's all part of it, a part of the creative process, and it's always very fun to look back onto as well, that we have that experience. So yeah.
Yeah.
He actually contacted me a little bit ago when this Google Arts app came out, and he was like, "Hey, Chad, I just want to see, does it really work?" And I was like, "Okay, so we'll try it." So I used one of the older pictures of me as King Philip IV, and I used a picture, and I was a 65% match to King Philip IV of Spain.
There you go.
So yeah.
So you were very well cast in that.
Very well cast. So that that was posted on their Instagram, and I posted it on mine as well. But yeah, it was really fun.
So we've talked about filmmaking. We've talked a little bit about performance.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like to make with wood?
It's kind of funny. I didn't really realize about this, but I like to revamp things. I like like to give old things a new life. And I'm actually sitting here on my desk, and on my desk, I have a lamp that I created out of an old water pump. And it's this old industrial, has a lot of piping. It has, an old Edison bulb on top of it. But I was walking in an antique store, which I like to do sometimes. I like to walk around in antique stores and antique malls and see, if there's anything that I can repurpose. And I saw this little piece. It was $6. It was pretty hefty. And it had a threaded pipe on one side. And I was like, oh, wow. I mean, I bet I could create this into something. So I made this little base out of pipe and turned it into a lamp. And so that's not necessarily on the woodworking side, but it's still, using something to create something new. Like one of my friends, they asked me if I could make them a coffee table. I was like, okay, well, I was like, what are you thinking for a coffee table? They're like, I don't know, maybe an old window. And I was like, that's interesting. So I went and bought an old window that I found at one of these junk stores on the side of the road, and, built it into a coffee table. And it had these little hinges on it that you could lift it up, and you place magazines under it, but it still had the glass panels. So I had this box that was all wood, and just made a little coffee table out of an old window. So it's funny because we were talking about the circle of life, as cliche as that sounds, taking old things, letting them die, and giving them new life. And that it kind of flows into my woodworking side, where I love to take old things and give them new life. And turn them into something else, or just revamp them to give them a new place. So
yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's one side of things for me.
Yeah, maybe you can snap a picture of your lamp and we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll send you one.
So I know you're a parent.
Yeah.
And I'm not a parent yet, but I'm curious if becoming a parent has changed your view or your outlook of creativity at all.
It is apparent that I'm a parent. So that's another.
So the dad jokes have started.
Yeah, dad jokes started way before I was a dad. I've had a long history with a problem of dad jokes, so that's always there. Puns are always there for me. But yes, being a parent enhances my creativity, definitely. And I'm about to be a parent again for a second time. So
that's exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you. We have another little girl on the way. So I'm going to have 2 little girls. And I think it really affects my creativity in a positive way, because it's going back to that childlike mentality. My little girl, she loves to imagine and play and reenact, which we the other night we were upstairs, and any little girl has seen Frozen. It's something that is inherently we have to watch, right? So she loves the movie, and we were upstairs and we were reenacting the movie. She was at the door. My wife was on the other side of the door, and she was singing the song, "Do You Want to Build a Snowman?" knocking on the door.
Aww.
And I filmed it, and it was just the cutest thing I've ever seen. And those types of things she's playing. She has these ideas. She has, and she's almost 4. So she's starting to become more aware of imagination and the way that she plays. And it's very creative in that sense. And, I see a lot of things with her. She loves to draw. And then she starts to ask, "Daddy, can you draw me this?" So one thing that I don't really do a lot anymore, or I don't really talk about anymore, is I used to draw a lot. So I used to have a lot of sketching and things like that I would do. And I do miss that portion of it. But at some point, I got to let something go.
Right.
I can't do everything. So I'm not as good on that side as I would like to be as far as sketching and drawing. But it does help me in my creative ideas, though, with getting out, something that I see in my head. I can do a little quick sketch and kind of say, okay, this is how this is going to look. So that portion just really, really helps and just goes alongside of my filmmaking process. But doing that again, and, I don't think I would necessarily have done that had my daughter not say, "Hey, draw me a butterfly," or "Draw me a boat," and "Draw me a train." And she likes for me to draw something, and then she draws on top of it, and she adds her flair to it.
Nice.
So it's that collaborative process.
I love it. You do you follow Austin Kleon?
No.
He wrote Steal Like an Artist.
Okay.
He has young kids as well, and they do the same. So he'll draw a thing, and they'll draw a thing, and he shares on social media. Like he says, it's little collaborations with his kids,
Yeah.
and you should check that out. I'll
Okay.
be sure to link to that
Yeah.
in the show notes as well.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. Anything like that is and then it's just we're playing. We're playing. It's the creative side. She likes to come up with stories too, bedtime stories, and we have to make sure that we get the bedtime story right. So we'll be sitting there trying to get her to go to sleep, and she'll say, "Dad, tell me a story. Tell me a story about a unicorn, and this unicorn is going to be my best friend, and it's going to come to my house, and it's going to play. And originally, it was lost in the woods." And so it's a very detailed story, but I have to repeat that story to her exactly, or it will not be right.
Right, all the details have
Yeah,
to be
this
right.
is something that she just came up with. And it's like, okay, well, let me try and remember all this and repeat that to you. Or she'll come up with songs. She's already trying to be a songwriter. And then I'll have to sing that song back to her. A lot of times the melody's not there, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint. Yeah, but there's a lot of words there. So she's kind of figured out that you can create things, and then you can come up with ideas and songs and draw. And we definitely want to push that pursuit for her, because we see a huge interest in it for her. And she's also taking ballet now. So it's another art form that she actually asked to take. We didn't push her towards, but she saw that her mommy used to do ballet, and that's something that she sees on cartoons or whatever, and she's just very interested in it. And she's actually very disciplined about it. She listens very well in class, and she really tries hard to do an arabesque, or to make sure that she's following the rules of the art. Which is pretty interesting. And seeing her get better is always a fulfilling thing. So
Nice. So let's see. What fascinates you?
what fascinates me? Nature fascinates me. There is so much beauty there in nature that it is something that I could look at for hours and never be bored. One of my hobbies is hiking and camping, and I like to be out in the woods because it almost resets me, right? It's something that gives me a stress relief. Just thinking about nature and seeing the beauty of nature, and it all comes back to imagery, right? It's something that in my filmmaking, even in photography, that I'm starting to do more of now. It is the visual aspect of it is intriguing to me, and how 90-degree angles and straight lines don't necessarily happen organically in nature. So it's shocking to me that those patterns don't really bring themselves inside of a tree or something like that. It has this life to it, and there I go getting philosophical again. It's it has this, I don't know, it just has this feeling to it that once you're out there, I don't know, it's an emotional reaction for me. And it's just a good place to reset, and then technology fascinates me. And how do we use that to better our lives without getting to the point where robots take over, right? We don't
Right.
want that. So, I mean, if Battlestar Galactica taught us anything, we should understand that robots will take over.
Yeah, we have to be very
Be
careful.
very careful. But yeah, artificial intelligence is interesting to me now. It's fascinating me now, and how artificial intelligence is even getting into our marketing of everyday items, and the way that world is kind of connecting with us. For me, I think marketing and advertising has to be authentic, but we're running this fine line of there's I can't remember the name of the Instagram account. I think it's Kayla or Michaela, something like that. But it's it's this model that is a 3D rendered model that is portrayed as being real.
Wow.
And she has tons of followers on Instagram, and she has a lot of friends that are models. And I saw this while I was at South by Southwest, and they were talking about, that connection. We talked about influencer marketing and that connection of trying to give a good, authentic story to those followers, to that audience that they're going to. But when the influencer is an artificial intelligence, is that still an authentic connection? Because it might be backed by a team of people that are coming up with these ideas. So it still might be authentic in that sense, but the face of their personal brand is fake. So it's running this fine line of, is artificial intelligence going to be an authentic connection to the way that we market to people?
Right. That's interesting. Also in movies, they're starting to put in
Yeah.
like the 3D graphic people with the real life people. And you kind of wonder where that's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then you're like, okay, well, what about actors?
Right.
Is that are we just gonna all be voice actors? Is that what's gonna happen, or is the computer gonna take over that too? But I feel like there's always gonna be a human element to any kind of art that you create, and I don't think that's ever gonna go away. What I hope for the future is that a lot of this artificial intelligence, a lot of these robots take away the mundane portions of our life that allow us to focus on the art, allow us to create things that robots can't create, right?
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
There's somebody that has to create the robot. So if anybody wants to do a job now, start learning to code, kids, because
Right.
it's that's the new jobs of the future. But so it's just interesting and fascinating to me how we're kind of at this pivotal point where things are starting to shift more and more. Like in my house, I'm not going to say it very loud, but I have an Echo because I don't want to say the trigger word, because then it will just start listening to me. Not that it doesn't already listen to me all the time. But I set up my house already on triggers. Like if I say, Alexa, turn off the living room, there it goes. Okay. So it's those simple things that I can always flip a switch. It's not something that is, hard to do, but being able to voice control your house, why not? That's just a fun thing. But I have it on 3 different lamps. So I tell myself that it's necessary, so I don't have to go to every lamp and turn it on and off. So
there you go, saving you steps.
Yeah, but that's also fascinating to me. Just the technology side of things. That what are those things in the future that's going to take away the mundane, so we can focus on the art of life.
Right. That was, I don't know if you know much about Buckminster Fuller, but that was a lot of his vision.
Yeah.
Was that we could focus on living instead of working.
Yeah.
We could do the things that mattered, and solving problems, creative problem solving and creativity. And
yeah.
we're getting there.
Yeah. How do we get to that utopia?
Yeah.
So that's definitely a fascinating thing to think about.
Okay. So usually creators are asked how to become a professional at what they do. But my question is this. Mm-hmm. If someone wanted to just dabble in filmmaking, and we talked a little bit about this before, we can go in a little deeper, where would they start?
Yeah, like we said before, you have a creation tool in your pocket. I'd say start there. I always tell people who want to be a filmmaker, I tell them to start with photography, because it's inherently the same in a sense, where you're focusing on the imagery of it. But photography, in my opinion, is a lot harder. Well, there's different levels of hard, but because in filmmaking, you got to think about a lot of different things, like audio and other things that go along with it. But in photography, you have to tell a story in that one image. So that image has to be right. It has to be perfect. It has to tell that story that you're wanting to convey. And that's what's hard about it to me. I feel like if you're wanting to create 24 frames per second filmmaking, then focus on that one frame in photography. And that really is something that is going to enhance your filmmaking side, because once you know how to use a camera to create what you want it to do for one frame in a picture, there are very similar through lines when you get into the filmmaking process. So I say start with photography. You've got a good photo camera in your pocket with your cell phone. You've got a good video camera in your pocket with your cell phone. So use what you have, whether it's, I started out on let's go way back. I started out filming on a Canon XL2, and that was a DV tape-based camera. And before that, I started out on photo cameras. I was taking pictures on photo cameras, and that was, normal film. And then it transitioned into, okay, I thought, I would like to do video more. So I got the video camera and I focused on, trying to film and trying to get the image that I wanted out of that. And then from there, when 2008 came and, the 5D Mark II came out, and, video on DSLRs became a huge thing, which I think was amazing. It opened up so many possibilities to people. So the barrier to entry to get into filmmaking had drastically dropped, because at that time, cell phones they couldn't service that side of things. It just wasn't there yet. So getting to do one of the commercials that I was in at the time, it was a Ruffles thing, and they were filming it on a 5D Mark II. And I was so confused when I first saw it. And I was like, what is going on? I'm on this commercial set, and then they've got a photo camera here. I'm like, what? I don't understand. But when I saw the image that came back from it, I was like, what? And it just sparked like, this is an interesting time, because cameras are going to get smaller. Cameras are going to do multi-purpose things.
Right.
And it was kind of sparked a lot more interest in me. And, I filmed on multiple different cameras, but I always enjoy having a camera that does photo and video. I'm coming full circle back to doing a lot more photo work now too. So I think both of those things are they go hand in hand, is photo and video. I feel like to be a good videographer, you need to start with photography. And I think that's going to help you capture the image that you want to capture. And if anybody else wants to dabble, we talked about this before, but I asked them to just do it. Just do it, because there are going to be so many excuses that you're not going to create something that you want to create. I do it myself. I give myself every excuse in the book. I don't have time, or I have a little kid and another one on the way. I can't be doing this. But if you have that urge to create something, if you have that urge to have that creativity, just try it, And that leans back to the curiosity of it. Is, when you have that curiosity, and when you want to try something. So I say take away all your barriers and just go out and try and make something. Otherwise, it's always a good idea, but it's never followed through unless you try it.
Perfect. Yeah. Just do it.
Just do it. Nike said it best, didn't they?
So, Chad, where can we connect with you online?
So I post a lot on Instagram on what I'm doing. That's my main social media outlet, at Chadwick Elliott. And that's CHADWICK. And Elliott is spelled correctly with ELLIOTT. Anybody who spells it with one T, they're not an Elliott.
And we'll link to that in show notes if you want to just click it.
So that's my that's the best way to connect with me online is through Instagram.
It's very visual, so it's a good platform for creatives.
Yeah, I love it. You can tell stories there. You can take pictures there. You can put video there. It's my favorite social media platform, definitely.
Great. Well, thanks for coming, and it's been good to catch up.
Yeah, great to catch up with you as well.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. A special thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon. And if you'd like to join us, you can pledge as little as $1 a month. Right now, we have Camp Kindle going on, which is a special bonus just for patrons of all pledge levels. And it is a virtual creative retreat. This session is all about wonderment. We're doing art projects like watercolor washes. We're putting a zine together, and there will be more exciting things coming in August. So if you want to check that out, go to curiouspixie.com. And if you'd like to support the podcast without becoming a patron, you can always subscribe, rate, and review. Thanks again for listening, and don't forget to use #KindleCuriosity.